So he's been built to be a pro athlete and not to be doing TED Talks. You know what I mean? So, like, what do we expect? What do we expect?
Because there's something easy on the eye about a left-footed forward. Is that the romantic final is between four-time winners River Plate, like one of the biggest football clubs in the world in many different ways. The other club is Peñarol, who are like this Uruguayan giant, five-time winners of the Libertadores. Hello, welcome along to episode number 14, I think, of the of Not Another Sports Pod. Ollie Wilson's giving me the shrug of the shoulders, but it is episode 14 with myself, David, and Mr. Oliver Wilson. I'm back in grey, grisly, crime-ridden, falling off a precipice, UK. It's nice about Ollie Wilson's got a woolly hat on just to double down on the horrendous weather in this beautiful green and pleasant land. I will say only one thing: when I was flying back in, and you see why it's called a green and pleasant land off Fair Country, there was just a tiny little, this is nice. Like, look at those rolling hills, the grey weather. I'm back home. And then I saw someone like assault someone on the tube within 20 minutes of getting back, had to call the police. And I was like, this country's over.
And then you were like, I'm back home. Yeah, no, I get it. I remember this bit now.
We're back.
Okay.
We're
just going to send you back. Isn't that what we're going to do now? I mean, that sounded like a plea to anybody out in Argentina to get this man a visa and get him back
Millet, take me. I'll be you. No, but I saw more crime in 20 minutes back than I did in 2 months in Argentina. But that's a different question.
There is something.
Every country has its flaws.
Brilliant though about flying back into the UK, and you look down as you're coming into land at Heathrow or wherever, and I genuinely love the kind of, so much of it is quintessential picturesque British countryside that you can see from up there. And like anything that you look at far away, you can't see any of the negatives, and you're just like, it does feel like home, and it doesn't feel like landing in any other country that I've ever landed in my entire life. I understand your desire to be back home. As I say, we will we'll see how long it lasts before you're champing at the bit to get back out to South America once again. But I
live about an hour 10 drive away from Heathrow Airport, Ollie, right? And I was going to get an Uber. This is just turning into a bitchy start to the pod, but I was going to get an Uber and it was 77 quid. And having got used to RG prices, well, that probably would have been a tenth of the price. I was just like, holy shit. And so I took public transport like the fucking warrior that I am after 24 hours.
I'll tell you what, I've never on a South American broadcast lost talk back to the director at halftime when you're trying to run through the halftime show. So that was, that's another positive for South American with the sports journalism and the broadcasting world.
That's what happened to you this weekend.
Yeah, lost complete talk back to the truck the way through a halftime show.
Let's talk football before the negativity from both of us swamps this pod. Not Another Podcast, episode 14. Ollie, I know you wanted to start by talking about Chelsea. You've written in a WhatsApp message to me a few moments ago, you wrote, we've got to eat our words for our mockery of Chelsea. But I'm struggling to remember where we did mock them. Like, we might have said what everyone else has said, which is for 10 years they spent £1 billion and they haven't really... They've won trophies, but they haven't really matched in trophies what they've done in terms of... spending. But do we ever mock them on Not Another Sports Pod?
Maybe not on Not Another Sports Pod, but I think the footballing world in general was vilifying them and mocking them throughout the start of this season. I mean, you couldn't go on any social media app without seeing a Chelsea meme about how it was similar to overcrowding in like third world countries and prisons, or how they were going to have 16 double-decker buses to transport the squad to and from Europa League games or to the northeast to go and play Newcastle and stuff because of the number of players that they were bringing in. And they were the Premier League's butt of the footballing joke for the whole of the summer, with this wild Moneyball style policy of just bring this guy in and this guy and this guy, and we keep spending and spending and spending until we've got all the tools that we want and that think can make an impact in this season. And they're playing pretty good football at the moment. And going forward, they look fantastic. And the man who was ridiculed for a lot of last season, Nico Jackson, is firing on all cylinders. And he and Cole Palmer had an unbelievable combination again this weekend in their victory over Brighton. And Chelsea are just on fire to start this season. And I know we can talk about Arsenal, we can talk about City. And, I don't think anybody really looks until this week's City performance like they were going to catch City. But now what we've seen from City this weekend against Newcastle, you see fallibility, and you see a title race that could include Arsenal, could potentially include Chelsea as well if they can continue this level of form and this run, and maybe a few others can get themselves in the hunt as well. I'm just enjoying where the fallout from the City-Arsenal game has put us now for a Premier League title race, and I will not have you saying that the title is over until now we get to April.
No, I have a feeling that podcast's certainly going to maybe look pretty silly come springtime, Ollie. I want to talk about Cole Palmer briefly. And more specifically, I want to talk about, or more generally maybe, I want to talk about the left-footed forward. Because there's something easy on the eye about a left-footed forward. And I don't know whether it's because left-footed players and people that are left-footed in general, left-handed, are in the minority, like maybe like 10, 15% of the population. So you just see it less. So therefore, it packs a different kind of punch. But a left-footed forward, I mean, your Van Persies, like it just looks slightly different on the eye. I'm not quite sure why that is. Is it because the angles are a little bit different than most other things you see on a football pitch? But it's just something about the way Cole Palmer plays. It's just like, this is so nice. It's so soft on the eye.
I think it's more the rarity, but I think you also find this in every single sport. A southpaw looks so different in boxing, the kind of more left-handed lean with the jab rather than a right-handed lean with the jab. Same with golfers, tennis players, because it's so unique and so different. And because I think as many of us are right-handed, we look at that and think, how on earth are you able to do that left-handed? Because if you've ever tried to play another sport, particularly something like tennis or golf, which is a racket or club in hand, or baseball, as a lefty, when you're a right-handed person, it is nigh on impossible. And look, it takes a lot of players a long, long time for them to get comfortable being able to play with both feet when it comes to football. And you see it all the time, that modern-day players just don't have that ability in them, and instead they'd rather cut inside and shoot when you've got wingers that are right-footed playing on the left flank, etc. So it's so nice and so novel almost to see either a left-sided winger that can take on a man, take him to the byline, which doesn't happen as often, or just seeing that kind of bend from the other angle, coming from right to left inside and curling it into the top corner. I mean, it just looks maybe more difficult to us because of that, and perhaps a touch more impressive. But what Cole Palmer was doing this weekend, right-footed or left-footed, everything looked impressive. I mean, that free kick is one of the best free kicks that I've seen in the Premier League for a long time. The fact that he hits the side netting first is superb. You'd laud that as a penalty take, let alone a dead ball effort from 22 yards out.
The first player ever to score 4 Premier League goals in the first half of a football match, Ollie. There's numerous other records beside. He got 22 Premier League goals last season, 6 and 6 already this season. Is he on form the best English player?
I mean, on form, you probably say so, yeah. I can't think of anybody else that can really match him. I think it's a really tough thing to say because hindsight's obviously 2020, and I'm assuming you're starting to lead into the Euros and perhaps why Cole Palmer wasn't more involved at the Euros this summer just gone. Is this where we're going?
No, I'm just thinking on form, and let's call form like the last 2 to 3 months, and he is the best since the start of the season. I mean, he's done more than Foden, done more than Saka. I don't know. He's the most informed player in the English player in world football at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jude Bellingham probably had a better 12 months prior to the start of this season.
12 months, sure.
He's got his injury now, so that rules him out of the conversation. Now, what Jude would be doing in this Real Madrid side right now, comparative to the importance of Cole Palmer, we'll never know. I'd say Bellingham, though last season, had a better season than Cole Palmer. I mean, he was in the conversation for the Ballon d'Or and looked like one of the best attacking midfielders on the planet, all in the space of getting settled in at Real Madrid. I mean, it was unbelievable what Bellingham did. So, yeah, I'd probably still take Bellingham over Palmer at this point if you're asking me the best England player right now. But that's only because we haven't seen enough of Bellingham because he's out on the sideline.
Who do you think is the biggest comparison to Cole Palmer? I heard, I can't remember who it was this weekend. Was it Theo Walcott?
Theo Walcott,
sort of saying he's half Van Persie, half Dennis Bergkamp. Like, I mean,
yeah, I didn't really get that.
Because for me, you know what I think he's a bit more like than either of those two? He's like a Raul with better goal scoring stats. Because Raul was always like 1 in 3 without looking at it. Raul, the famous Real Madrid and Spain striker, he was perhaps less of a clinical goal scorer than Cole Palmer. But I don't know. For me, it feels like he's got that little bit of a similar start because he's not. You could never play Cole Palmer as a number 9. Or you could, but you wouldn't. Whereas Raul always wants to sit in a bit or play off the right, like Cole Palmer does.
I don't know. I mean, Raul was still, though, an out-and-out centre-forward, in my opinion. Like, he was the leading front man. It was a front two that Real Madrid have, which is why he was slightly more to one side. because it was Raul and Morientes for a large part of that successful spell. Palmer is playing a very different role then to what Raul is playing, which is why I was also slightly surprised by the Bergkamp analogy, in that I get it in that they're in a slightly more similar position, playing off a main centre forward, but I don't necessarily see the similarity between Bergkamp and Palmer's game, in that I thought Bergkamp's game actually was a bit more bullish because he'd had to come through playing at Inter in Serie A, and so he had a bit more of a physically imposing nature to the game. It was strong but flowing and fluid. And
he didn't come off the flanks, Bergkamp.
No.
Like Bergkamp played, it was all beautiful, but it was all fairly within the 18-yard line.
Whereas Palmer seems to glide, I would say, more around the field. And as you say, it can be far wider on the wings. In terms of an actual then comparison, I don't know, because we haven't seen that many players play this type of role that successfully in the manner in which he's playing it. And I'm not saying he's breaking football and is this absolutely new style of player or anything, because someone will come to my head eventually. But yeah, I think
Di Maria, Rivaldo, like even the Van Persie one, I thought was a bit odd
loose,
because he's not. Van Persie was more of a goal scorer, basically, wasn't he?
I mean, it's more like the position he's playing is more like Ronaldinho. But again, Ronaldinho was very much...
You mean the freedom?
Yeah, but the manner in which Ronaldinho played it in was so quintessentially Brazilian, and Palmer's not playing it in that style at all. But the position-wise is that sort of player, I think. But look, I don't necessarily enjoy making those comparisons anyway. That's why I switch off a lot of sports media when you hear, oh, well, he's the next, and he's the next this, or he's the next that, or who's better from this era. It's like, it doesn't matter. We'll just enjoy what Cole Palmer's doing right now, and hopefully it'll continue, because it's an unbelievable start to the season for him. And this weekend, as you say, writing a name in Premier League history, it's so impressive. 4 goals in the first half. I mean,
crazy,
ludicrous.
Yeah, and he also, I think he struck the post, had a goal ruled out for VAR. I mean, he could have very easily got 5, because I know 5. Okay, I got a quiz question for you, Ollie, and the listeners at home. So Wilkinson's, Wills, all our loyal listeners taking this one. Ollie, 5 players have scored 5 goals in a Premier League game. Can you name them? I reckon you'll get 3 of them.
I genuinely don't, because I suck at these sorts of things. When somebody suddenly says, right, quiz, do this, my mind goes blank. Sit me down and put me to my own thoughts for 20 minutes, like in an evening, and I'll randomly start thinking about this sort of stuff, and it'll pop in my head. But I will go... I mean, did Henry do it?
No.
Really? That's surprising. Van Persie?
No.
Somebody did it when United won 9-0 against Ipswich.
Correct.
And I'm trying to think of who the forward would be. I mean, not...
Do you want me to put you
just put me out of my misery, man. I hate this sort of thing.
Andy Cole did it in 1995, Man United against Ipswich. Alan Shearer did it in 1999, Newcastle against Sheffield Wednesday. Jermaine Defoe did it in 2009, Tottenham against Wigan. Berbatov did it, Man United against Blackburn Rovers 2010. Sergio Aguero did it in 2015. Pretty mad that the last time someone did it was 9 years ago before... 9 years ago. I was going to say before Cole Palmer did it, but of course he didn't. 5 goals in a Premier League game. Only been done 5 times before, and not really in the last decade.
Yeah, I forgot. I definitely wouldn't have got Berbatov. Definitely wouldn't have got Jermaine Defoe either. I mean, yeah.
And no player's ever scored 6. No player's ever scored a double hat-trick in a Premier League game. I mean, pretty bloody difficult to do, but there we go.
Yeah, I think Mark Scott asked him on the on Match of the Day, who, was he frustrated? And Palmer did say, I could have had 5 or 6, and I probably should have as well. And I kind of like that as well, not being happy and settled with just 4 and a convincing victory in the end over Brighton. But look, I want to achieve the maximum out of my own capacity every single week. There are a lot of jokes around Cole Palmer as well, about how he's too... not mentally up there to be able to really have any doubts in himself.
Yeah, is that... What do we think about that, Ollie? Because I've seen a lot of that on social media, and it's one of those things that, again, is treading the line between, where is the line of football banter? And is mocking someone's IQ, is that fair game or not?
Yeah, I mean, I don't...
Which is essentially what all those memes are doing.
I don't think it's fair,
mocking his
because
IQ.
we've gone out there as a footballing consuming public, right, and said we want to see more of these players and we want to hear from them more, which is why we have more of these video features and interviews, whether it's through clubs, sponsors, whatever. So we get loads and loads of that. And then when we get that, we go, ha ha, look at him. He's thick as 2 short planks. And it's like, well, it's just mean more than anything else. It's
he was
just
on the
really
training ground.
Mean.
Yeah, sorry he wasn't reading like notes from the underground or like, improving his Sudoku or like improving his chess rating. Like he was on the fucking training ground training so he could become this incredible footballer, right? Like I don't know what do people want from him? They want like a footballer who's also got like an insanely high IQ that can
we don't ask these
it's
players to focus on anything like education as they're going through these football academies. If there's a great player at these academies, like I'll just get through whatever lessons you need to do, etc. But like, do this. Come on, get down to training session, do some extra reps, do this. So he's been built to be a pro athlete and not to be doing TED Talks. You know what I mean? So, like, what do we expect? What do we expect? That's why...
Can't turn up to a Cole Palmer TED Talk, though.
That's why the US system is different, but I think very valuable for the young players. And you talk, the money's come into college sports, which is... Some people say it's good, some people say it's bad, etc. But what they do learn at college and having to go through the college system is they have more time as a young adult where they're going through things like media training. They are still expected to be in classes where they are kind of being taught a little bit how to grow up and at least present yourself slightly better. So these guys get into their professional athletic careers and they do know how to speak to the media, even if it's just being well trained to bat away questions and all that kind of stuff. So it's just the system we have at the moment with these young footballers in this country, and I don't blame Cole Palmer for it at all. And why would you? If I had his footballing ability, do you think I would have focused that much at school? Probably not. No.
Like, I ain't reading a book. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I could play like that, do you think I'm going home reading a book? Like,
I'm only reading a Panini sticker
counting my money and yeah, exactly. A couple of things that popped into my head, Ollie. You mentioned Ronaldinho, right? Our good friend JC down in South America, who's been covering Brazilian football for 20 years, he told me a great anecdote. After Atletico Mineiro won the Copa Libertadores, South America's Champions League, in 2013, Ronaldinho, who was part of that side, basically didn't play an away match for 2 months. So he was just partying for like 2 months.
Yeah,
so he
like
just didn't play an away, and no one cared because they just won the Libertadores. So didn't play an away league game for 2 months.
Yeah,
Hilarious.
I mean, we have that kind of with some of the Six Nations fallouts when like Wales won the Grand Slam, and I think one of their players was pictured 4 days later getting on a plane to go somewhere, and he was still in his Welsh rugby kit because he hadn't got changed for 3 days because he's been on a 3-day bender. You know, the Jack Grealish stuff, things like that. I don't mind it. I get a bit annoyed actually when it gets overblown because I don't care that the guy's been out on the piss for 4 days. Like, it's great. You've just achieved like your crowning goal.
Ronaldinho.
Yeah, I mean, look, the guy's got more money than God. Probably at that
and
point.
The Libertadores is like, that's it, by the way, in South America. That is the absolute apex. Like, it's got to be,
go back through the old episodes and listen to Boca Nico talking about what it means to Boca Juniors fans to win the Libertadores. Like, they don't care about winning the league. Sure, if it comes, it's great. But if you win the Libertadores, that puts you into history. Like, that top echelon of Boca Juniors players, and all of them get remembered. Half of them get bloody statues somewhere around the city or around Argentina as well if they win a Libertadores. And so if you're Ronaldinho, you've achieved everything with the Brazilian national side, probably the second most important thing in Brazilian football aside from the Libertadores. Then you go back and you win the Libertadores. Like, you wouldn't have to buy a drink for the rest of your life. You probably just need to have 2 months of partying to get that out of the system so that you can then go back to trying to lead a normal life. And obviously that didn't really happen with him in the end, but
Just to wrap up on Chelsea, I think one thing is the criticism of Chelsea, and it's not just in the last few years, it's probably the last sort of decade or 15 years, the lack of stability around the club, the crazy money they spent, the no clear kind of structure or direction or hierarchy of the football club in this recent kind of mad transfer spending era. The one thing that all Chelsea fans can hit back on with that is that the game is about trophies, right? And even in the last 10 years, Ollie, I mean, Chelsea won the Premier League in 2017, won FA Cup in 2018, won EFL Cup, a decade ago, 2015, won the Champions League in 2021, won the Europa League in 2019, won the Super Cup in 2021, the World Club Cup in 2021. Like, do you know what I mean? They've won a lot of trophies the last decade. So it's always something that you can say, whatever you say about our football club, like Chelsea have continued to just swirl through managers, but they just still win trophies.
Yeah,
consistently.
Look, doing it the right way and everything is a wonderful thing that Arsenal and Tottenham are trying to do, but how much better are those trophy cabinets? How much more bragging rights are there at the moment for Chelsea, champions of Europe? You'll never sing that to some of those clubs. So, I want to see my sides winning football competitions and trophies. I don't want to see them lifting a trophy for winning the playoff final or coming second place in the Football League. I mean, that is disgusting to me. You don't get trophies for coming second in the league and getting promoted. But I do want to see, fans just want to have trophies and victories. They don't really care about the money that much. The money is money in sport is this thing that we have been told over the last few years to really value. Like, a player's transfer value. That means a lot. Or the amount of money that's coming into the football club. The amount of money that's going into a football club doesn't matter to a fan as long as that football club is still winning games.
It's not your money. It's not my money. They don't
really have an impact on them at all, except for maybe in things like ticket prices and stuff like that. The money is down to success for the business. I don't care about the business of my football team. So, great, we've got 600 million in the bank, but we're middle of the Premier League table. Who cares? Doesn't mean anything. I'd rather be broke and have silverware and stacks of trophies piled upon high. Be fine.
One thing before we talk about Juventus, Ollie, one thing that's kind of popped up a little bit in recent weeks, maybe we've touched on it actually, is just the sheer volume of football there is and the players kind of kick. Yeah, go for it.
If we're moving away, I wanted to quickly just ask you something on the Premier League. We had this question kind of last week, but I want to manoeuvre it in a slightly different way for you. I don't know how much you saw of the City performance against Newcastle. It's a very different looking City side in terms of the confidence you felt that you had in them, particularly in that midfield mark. The absence of Rodri is going to come into that and it's going to potentially be a huge factor this season if this is the way that things are going to look for Manchester City. Would it be a horrible thing to say that Rodri's injury might be the best thing to happen to the Premier League this season? Because I don't want players getting injured, and I don't want to see people, not being able to play the sport and play it to the highest
it's not
ability.
A horrible thing to say because you're asking a question. Would Rodri's injury be the best thing to happen to the Premier League title race this season, or the Premier League in general, maybe because smaller clubs have got a chance against City? Possibly, yeah, because I think you could make a case now for a four-way title race. I personally don't think that will happen. I still think City and Arsenal are by far the best two sides, but you can make a case for Chelsea and Liverpool being part of it. I think Manchester City, as we've referenced numerous times on Not Another Sports Pod, they basically get 90 points every season. That's just what they do. But Rodri probably takes 4 to 6 points off, I think. So I want to defend some of the stuff I said on Not Another Sports Pod a couple of months ago, because that was all based around a fully fit City squad, basically. So Rodri not being there, it just chips a little bit away. It doesn't take 10 points off them over the course of the season, but it takes 4 or 6 points off them over the course of the season. The only thing is, they are a football club that have got money, and in January, I'm pretty sure they go out and buy a replacement. So they got 3 months to kind of stay in the title race. And then I think they buy Zubimendi or whoever else is available in that position.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what will happen in that January transfer window, because it's much harder to integrate players into a side than it is to have the players that already fit the holes that you need filling. And you don't know how someone's going to be reacting.
But top players are top players. I think if City can get the right man and just stay in the competitions till January, then they'll be okay.
Yeah, we'll see.
I think Arsenal, man, you can make a case that Arsenal are looking a little bit more vulnerable now. I mean,
it wasn't convincing against Leicester on the weekend, that's for sure.
They look a bit more open this year for whatever reason. I mean, it's a small sample size of 6 games, but they look a little bit more open to me.
That Leicester-Arsenal game, by the way, was a better game to watch than City-Arsenal the previous week.
I mean, I only saw the highlights of Arsenal-Leicester.
I was thinking about this in the fallout, and I meant to touch on it last week, and we kind of got sidetracked by it. The City game was great in terms of excitement and intensity, and I think we actually said we weren't going to talk too much about the actual game last week anyway, because we wanted to get into all the implications of it and stuff. But I was watching that game just over a week ago, and every time I saw it and was watching it, it was City stuck on the edge of the area and not actually really doing much with it, which I get. There's tension, there's excitement, it's a big Premier League game, it could have huge impact on the title race. But it's not actually that good to watch. It's not easy on the eye. One team.
It was not easy on the eye, but as a spectacle, I think it was. I think it was something special.
Whereas Arsenal-Leicester was a much more fun game for the neutral to kind of sit in, watch, take in, let it just flow into your eye sockets, and let your brain just enjoy what was some of the most aesthetically pleasing football that we've seen all season. That's all I'm saying.
Ollie, is there such a thing as too much football? I mentioned this because a lot of players recently have been saying there's too much football. Was it Rodri, in fact, ironically, before he got injured, that said players considering going on strike. Numerous other footballers have said this now. There's too much football. First of all, is this really on the players? Is this really to do with the players? Because sides now just have bigger squads. So those players can be utilised more efficiently now. I mean, is there too much football? As a football fan, as someone that works in the industry, and I know you'll say more football the better, like, better income, etc., etc. But just like, is there too much football? Is there a thing as too much football?
Oh, definitely. The reason why, for instance, okay, so my dad's a huge football fan, right? Absolutely loves it. He'll watch as much as he can of whatever different leagues. He tries to watch games. We've discussed how he was watching Bet365 feeds of Libertadores games this year just because I was doing commentary on it and stuff like that.
Lovely.
He's great in that. But he remembers like iconic games from his childhood still because there was a scarcity of football. So the games that you got, you took in even more. And you made an effort to sit down and watch it. In the same way, I think we as kids, I know I certainly, Wednesday and Tuesday night, and at one point it was just one night of the week that we had a Champions League game on ITV. Mm-hmm. And you would, I'm definitely going to watch Man United against Fenerbahçe. I don't know anything about Fenerbahçe at all, this rogue Turkish side, but I'm going to sit down and watch it because it's the only Champions League football I'm going to get to watch. And there's no other highlights of any other games taking place that evening. But I still remember Trezeguet's goal for Monaco at Old Trafford, which was outrageous from long distance. Batistuta's strike at Wembley against Arsenal when he just smashed it past David Seaman's forehead at the near post. Those moments stick into your mind so much more. Whereas now, it's football every single night of the week. And particularly working in the job that we do, there's almost a level of expectation that we need to watch quite a lot of it. And it's very difficult to bounce from League One, League Two, Championship, Champions League, Europa League, Premier League, Italian, French, Dutch maybe. Keep an eye on what's happening in South American games in midweek as well, and obviously in the domestic campaigns on the weekend. And a lot of it just starts to wash into you. And I think fans do kind of have this to some extent of there's so much of it, none of it matters that much. Or a lot of it doesn't matter that much. And that's why the FA Cup and the League Cup have kind of fallen by the wayside in terms of importance. Because there's so much football available and on TV and that the clubs are involved in. Right, I'm just going to pick and choose the ones that really matter to me. I'm not going to go to that League Cup game because I know I can go to a Champions League game in a few weeks' time, save my pennies and go to that game instead, get completely ripped off to go and see top-flight European football at an English ground and then see them in the Premier League on the weekend on the Saturday. So 100% we got too much football.
Okay, yeah, I think, but what happens? I mean, the trajectory, Ollie, is just more. Like next time we've got this extended Club World Cup, right? Which people will watch. Like it's exciting, it's fun, it's River Plate, it's Real Madrid, it's Man City, it's Chelsea. Like it's fucking exciting. I guess it'll be on telly. There's not a major tournament. I mean, basically every summer now has been filled, right?
Yeah, and look, the expanded Champions League this year. Everybody looked at the idea initially 18 months ago and was like, "Oh no, this is going to be weird. No fun group stage. All these teams playing together." We've literally had a round of games. And the first thing I heard on BBC 5 Live the following morning was, I'm kind of into this new Champions League. We don't know how it's going to impact our league right now. But after a round of games, there are experts out there going, I think this is a really good idea, actually. This works brilliantly because I got to watch this one good game of Liverpool against AC Milan this week or something like that. And it's like, firstly, let's have 5 minutes to consolidate our actual opinions on it and see what the impact is on it. And secondly, it is that just feed me more, because enough will hit with an audience and with the football viewing public that will be like, yeah, actually, that's okay. That's all right. Yeah, okay, we'll take that and we'll have that and we'll have that. The one thing that really does irk a lot of people still is the Premier League season finishing and straight on the bus to go off to do the post-season Asia tour, followed by the pre-season North American tour.
I guess that's what I'm talking about. When clubs basically can't complain because, as you say, like you got 4 days after the season ended last year, you got Newcastle, Tottenham playing each other in Australia. I mean, that is like that's absurd, absolutely absurd. The players, yeah, they can complain. I mean, they are treated a bit like cattle, aren't they? Or performing monkeys. Like it's.
I mean, you get paid that amount of money. You get asked to play those number of games. Look, you're not paid for anything, but it's a short career, and you're very valuable at this moment in time. But to these clubs, they're businesses. You're an asset, and I think. Yeah,
is it like you're the CEO of a company? And it's like, yeah, you work 80-hour work weeks because you're the fucking CEO of the company. Like, is it that kind of thing?
Well, I think
it's like you're Premier League.
I think it's more like the CEO is telling somebody underneath him that you need to stay late and work on the Johnson file this season. But once you've done this, you're going to get a huge bonus out at the end of it, and you'll be able to retire when you're 38. And it's like, yeah, okay. Because what people work in a job where they'll be able to retire by the time they're 35, 36? Not many. So that's
Not
what you
us.
get as a professional footballer, as an athlete. They're. I've always seen, whether rightly or wrongly, and again, player safety is paramount, but I have seen money in sport go up for athletes and thought a large part of that is obviously due to the expansion of TV revenue rights and the business of the sport, but also the kind of athletes get paid in like almost danger money. I always see it as. If you're really successful, you draw a lot of attention, but also you have a limited shelf life on your career in any sport. And that is another reason for, and I hope they go out and get as much money as possible from the bigger, wider corporations, but that is why you're getting paid a lot of money. And if the corporation is kind of asking you to do a lot more, you have an option. You can walk away or you can not play.
Sure.
We see players in the US, they sit out a season when they're not happy with their contracts, or they sit out a few games when they're not happy with their contracts. You can do that. It's just not advisable to do that to your employer, because most of us have that happen and we stop working. So it's an interesting one. And I'm undecided, very undecided where my kind of sympathies lie on it, to be honest.
Likewise. Let's talk about Juventus, Ollie. Haven't conceded a goal all season or just in Serie A this season?
This season. It's outrageous.
A few 0-0s in there, though.
Yeah, but...
Give us the context. By the way, give us the context to Thiago Motta being the new head coach, because he was a coach I really, really liked when he was at Bologna previously, right?
Yes.
I mean, I really like the way he kind of set up the side tactically, obviously overachieved with the Bologna side to take them into the Champions League. Just give us the context for those who don't follow Italian football, like why he's so important to Juventus in the kind of post-Max Allegri years.
Well, Thiago Motta is like the new shining light of Italian football coaching at this point. As you mentioned with Bologna, he created a very organised unit that were difficult to break down and would hit well on the counter, played with energy, fast pace going forwards when they had it. And they wouldn't score goals in abundance, but it's Bologna. You're not necessarily expecting that, but they would score enough goals and keep a very organised backline that they'd be able to find victory, and that's why they're in the Champions League this season. Motta's name was linked to a host of big clubs, particularly around Italy. It looked at one point like he was going to be going to Milan this summer. Instead, goes across to Juventus, because Juventus got tired of Max Allegri's football, and Max Allegri being back at the club once again, not seen as enough success to warrant him sticking around. And Allegri doesn't play easy on the eye football. It is, again, very defensively structured, but it's also very restricting on creative players. One of the reasons Federico Chiesa has been seen as having a new lease of life going to Liverpool this season in the Premier League, and it's seen as a good move despite his injury problems, is that actually a player of his pace and talent and his raw attacking ability and his ability to cut inside or take a man down to the byline will be utilised more at Liverpool than it was necessarily at Juventus. So Motta comes in, and the reason why I brought this up about Juventus is because they've conceded one goal in the Champions League against PSV, but in Serie A they've yet to concede. Yeah, there's been a couple of 0-0s, and I will always give a manager in the first 5-6 months time to get their feet under the table, let alone players at brand new clubs, because you need to assess what you've got, what you have, what you want, and where you want to take this squad. But I find it very funny how so many people in world football have bemoaned Italian football for boring defensive football. And we get 6 games into a new season, Thiago Motta's Juventus haven't conceded, particularly after Allegri, another great defensive coach. And people are lauding Thiago Motta as this, like, oh my goodness, this is wonderful. Look at this defensive football perfection. Isn't that amazing? If this happens for the whole of the season and it's 1-0 victories from here on out for Juventus, Thiago Motta is not going to be lauded for that defensive quality. So it's just funny how the very beginning of the
Napoli
season...
win the league.
Yeah, well, anybody else, to be honest. If Inter run away with it again this season, if Milan can put up a fight. But yeah, it's just very, very funny how fickle footballing perceptions are. And the fact that Thiago Motta's gone into the biggest club in Italian football and produced this sort of record straight off the bat is great for Juventus fans. It may not be great for the perception of Italian football going forward. But yeah, I quite enjoy how he's getting his plaudits, at least for it.
Any other business then? Let's talk a bit of golf, shall we, Ollie? Oh, also want to mention Jose Mourinho. I mean, him going to Fenerbahçe. I think we might mention it one of the early, not on other sports pod episodes. He just made the move. I mean, just one of the most fascinating figures in the beautiful game since I started watching football, since he burst onto the scene, 2 decades ago. With that Porto side. I mean, his career trajectory has been absurd. I also feel like there's numerous chapters left in it, albeit not at the level that we've seen historically, right? But this Fenerbahce chapter going to Turkey is obviously mad. Quite clearly, it's going to end in tears sooner rather than later, because it always does with Jose Mourinho. But after that, there's going to be something else that's wild, right? Like he's going to take charge of an international team and do something in a big World Cup, or he's going to become Boca Juniors manager, or like something. That's just who he is. That's his personality, who he is as a coach. So there's chapters to come. At Fenerbahce, I think they're second in the league at the moment to Galatasaray because they lost against Galatasaray a couple of weeks ago. But just every week there's a Mourinho story. This weekend it was like he had on his laptop an error. Like during the game, he's got on his laptop an error that he thought the referee had made, and he kind of shows it to the TV camera. And it's just I know that like even 4 days ago, Ollie, he was pissed off because he's been made to wait for a press conference. A week before that, it was something. It's just who he is. Like it's just who he is. So. I mean, for Mourinho and Fenerbahce, I mean, even those two words together, Ollie, Fenerbahce, one of the powerhouses of Turkish football, and Jose Mourinho, I mean, how much sustainability is there, Like, it will only end in, like, a blaze of flames at some point in the not-too-distant future.
Well, the best thing is that it's sided 2-0 up. Like, Fenerbahce won. The unbelievable petty nature of a man who is, let's say, his public persona has become a very kind of feeling of a embittered man, because, and I some would argue that maybe it's because Pep Guardiola has just kept on going on and going on and going on to great things with Bayern and with City, after obviously their great intense rivalry between Mourinho and Guardiola at Barca and Real Madrid, whereas Jose's bounced around all over the place and continued his 3 years of the first year he comes in and causes a ruckus, the second year he wins something, the third year he has a massive falling out with everybody and is off onto the next plane to wherever else is going to take him. And I cannot think of anything better than him taking the reins at a Boca Juniors and having a Boca Juniors, River Plate, Gashado, Mourinho, Super Classico. I mean, if you want the animated managers on the sideline that would be the antithesis of those two footballing teams, that would be what you want. But I don't actually hate what Mourinho's done. And I think it's
in that specific instance, or just in general.
In this. I mean, I kind of like Jose anyway. I've always had a soft spot for him.
Yeah, likewise. I think he's hilarious.
He's good. He's good for the game as a personality and a bit of a wild man. But I really
the guy got a tattoo of the Conference League. The best thing to ever happen to the Conference League, which is like, let's be honest, like it's just a random made-up competition so clubs can play more games, so the TV companies can make more money. But the fact that he won it and got a tattoo of the Conference League trophy, I don't know, kind of wild.
It means more to me than the Champions League with Inter, doesn't it? Get that tattooed on the rear thigh or wherever it was. No, I just... We're talking about referees and VAR all the time in modern day football. And Jose Mourinho has just taken it upon himself to point out. He's just walking VAR for the officials at this point. And actually, somebody in that VAR booth should have looked at because he puts up a picture on his laptop in front of the camera of a mistake that led to, I think it was a disallowed goal for Edin Dzeko, I think, actually, for his side. And
who's 38 and still banging in goals for Fenerbahce.
Still going, yeah. And so Mourinho sets up this laptop which has a still of what he thinks was the incorrect decision from the referees, and it kind of explains why the goal shouldn't have been disallowed, and puts it up next to one of the cameras that then shows it out on the broadcast. Now, firstly, the broadcasts are going to show it. If the officials have a problem with this going out on air, the broadcasters don't need to show any of this. Like, this could have been all under wraps and no one needs to see it. The broadcasts are going to show it because it's Mourinho, it's box office, it's a brilliant moment in football. Secondly, it's just pointing out that the referee's made a bad decision. That's okay. You shouldn't book Jose Mourinho for pointing out that you're not doing your job well enough. That just seems really petty at that point for the official to go and give him a yellow card. I don't know what he's done in terms of infringing on the... Maybe he stepped out of his technical area to put the laptop in, but the rules of the manager out down on the sideline, I doubt it's written in the rules that you're not allowed to point out that the referee has made a mistake. And they're definitely allowed to put their point across in media after the game and to the fourth official during the game. So I'm not too sure what the problem is with Jose doing this. You don't want it to become a habit or anything like that. But wouldn't you kind of like to see Sean Dyche like holding an iPad on the touchline at Everton and just pointing to a mistake that he suddenly got up like midway through the game? Doesn't care about what's going on the pitch. He's just still bitter about a disallowed goal for offside 15 minutes earlier or something like that.
Yeah. It sort of also leans into the Americanization of the world and sport in general, right, Ollie? Like 15 years ago, Premier League managers were watching what was happening in front of them at like eye level. Whereas now, like if you look at them on the bench, they've got like all these monitors. Some of them got live stream of the game. It's just interesting that they're watching that actually because they can get a better view from that and all the replays and stuff as well. And we will eventually end up with a challenge system for VAR. I'm sure about that. I just think what America does, the world tends to copy. Might take a little bit of time, but I do think that's where we end up with VAR.
Do you think we'll get to the point where our professional sports are less dangerous for pro athletes than they are for the supposed amateur athletes at the academy levels and stuff? Because this was something that popped into my head while we were talking earlier. One of the biggest college American football games that can take place, Alabama against Georgia in what's called the SEC, the Southern States division of college football. It's where like all the big powerhouses are. And now there's money in college sports as well. There's a lot of money. I mean, there were rumours that some of the sides in the SEC were tapping up the Saudi PIF to be able to get money to give to their student athletes as a way. And I was like, I can't believe Saudi's going to get his finger in the college football pie, potentially. I don't think that's happened yet. But it's interesting how American football and the NFL in the US has so many more rules, legislation and restrictions on what you can do in terms of tackling, in terms of the way the game is played, compared to college football. And I just find it a really stark contrast that the young 18 to 20-year-old athletes with maybe not as fully developed brains and higher risk to long-term injury when it comes to things like concussion and stuff are playing a more violent version of the sport, perhaps with less kind of contact and impact in terms of the hitting because they're slightly smaller bodies and haven't been in the college and pro level gym and protein system of getting absolutely jacked, and 25, 26 is probably when they hit the peak of their physical power to be able to hit somebody. But it's more dangerous college football to me for an athlete's body than the NFL is now, and I find that so confusing that the young generation are being put through more physical contact than those at the professional level.
Yeah, I mean it's more dangerous based on the league football than it is Premier League football. I'm sure about that. Head injuries.
You think?
Yeah, Ollie.
Well, because I think
the chance of a broken leg will be higher. Head injuries, you don't have like all the medics around you. Someone has a heart attack on the pitch in the Premier League, like within 10 seconds someone's dealing with it. No, I think Sunday League football's got to be way more dangerous.
Well, I think that's down to the facilities that are around you rather than the sport necessarily, in terms of you haven't got the right.
Because it's clumsier. Sunday League's clumsy. People don't know what they're doing. There's less repercussions for bad challenges. I think it's good. I mean, it's hard to know the exact stats on that. I'll try and dig it out, but I'm sure your average Sunday, your average Sunday League game must be more dangerous. That's Windsor's obscure statement of the week. Wrapping up on football, can we talk about Roque Santa Cruz for 30 seconds?
Oh, the oldest ever goal scorer in the CONMEBOL Sudamericana at 42
Incredible.
years and
43 years
days.
Of age. Scored against Cruzeiro in the week. I mean, they went out, but like 43. Like, it's so old, man. Like, it's so old. And Fabio in goal for Fluminense was like a week shy of his 44th birthday and pulled off a couple of big saves for them as well. They went out as well. But yeah, I mean, to be playing at that level, just to give our listeners this sense, like the Libertadores and the Sudamericana, like they're the big competitions in South America. This isn't like the fourth tier of Paraguayan football Roque Santa Cruz is playing in. Like this is the peak, and he's fucking scoring still at 43. Like it's bonkers. It's absolutely bonkers.
Yeah. Is there a more impressive aging footballer than Roque Santa Cruz?
Zlatan was good, wasn't he? At 38, 39, Zlatan was good, and still playing for Milan at 39, and still certainly sort of 38, 39 was still scoring. The most impressive aging footballer? Oh, it's a great question. Feel free to send your thoughts in, by the way. Comment on Spotify, YouTube. To the most impressive aging footballer. Wow. I mean, Buffon was kind of great until the very end, Ollie, when he just started to make mistakes all the time and it looked a bit silly. But he also looked great as well. So he had that aesthetic, like amazingly sort of good-looking older Italian gent thing. The most impressive aging footballer. Yeah, Buffon's got to be up there. Zlatan.
Peter Shilton?
Yeah, I mean,
Playing for
Shilton's the
England,
GOAT.
right near.
Shilton's the GOAT, as in the most appearances, professional appearances ever of all time in any league anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Shilton's the GOAT, I suppose.
Shilton is another name to go up that. But I think scoring in a CONMEBOL Sudamericana quarter-final as a centre-forward that has to be one of the most impressive. Look, you can take the quality of the league and all that kind of stuff at a pinch of salt, but that has to be one of the most impressive feats of a striker, particularly in the latter part of their careers.
Yeah, because goalkeepers, look, it's impressive what Shilton did, and Fabio, we mentioned on Not Another Sports Pod a couple of weeks ago, this goalkeeper at Fluminense might end up breaking Shilton's record. But goalkeepers somehow is a little bit different. You're less likely to get injured throughout the course of your career. You expend less energy. You don't need the cardio that those older players need to have. And you just need to keep the agility. Whereas like for a striker, for an outfield player, incredible, yeah.
Well, unless you're a Sunday League goalkeeper. It's the most dangerous position you can play, isn't it, Dave? In football? World football? Sunday League
from
goalkeeper?
a corner, mate, yeah. Who knows?
Crowded 6-yard box in a Sunday League. I'd rather be a world of other places away from that.
There's a couple of our listeners who are big golf fans, by the way, Ollie, and I get a WhatsApp every week saying, like, Wilson nailed the golf stuff again. Wilson nailed the golf stuff again. So give us your pearls of wisdom, Ollie, as a very, very... knowledgeable man about all things golf.
There was a wonderful comeuppance if you are a bitter man towards the millions and millions of dollars that have gone into various golfers' pockets as they've gone across to live over the last few years. Because Jon Rahm, who needs to compete in enough European Tour events to be able to keep his Ryder Cup place coming up for the next Ryder Cup in the USA next year, went and played in the Spanish Open, one of the not biggest tournaments on the DP World Tour, but certainly means a lot, particularly to someone like Jon Rahm. And Jon Rahm ends up losing to Angel Hidalgo, who's ranked something like 128th in the world. And Jon Rahm's one of the best golfers on the planet right now, in a final round playoff for the Spanish Open, which I like Jon Rahm. I didn't begrudge him going across. Someone gives you $600 million to go and play for Saudis. Yeah, I'd probably go and do that if I was them. Play less golf and get paid a boatload more. That'd be fine by me. But yeah, it was just quite funny that Rahm goes back, enters his first European Tour competition in ages, and loses his home Open against this kind of barely ranked unknown Hidalgo. That was a beautiful moment in the golf this week. And then there was the boring President's Cup, which is you've got the Ryder Cup, Europe against the United States. Now the President's Cup is the United States against anybody else on the planet that isn't European. And the US going into this weekend had won 9 in a row, and some of those by a very convincing margin, shall we say. And, you know, the rest of the world team made a bit of a fist of it on the Friday. I think they swept a round of the 4 balls, which meant that they ate into the deficit after being beaten on the Thursday quite handily, so it was all looking fairly even. And it kind of got a bit closer going into the last round of singles on the Sunday, but the US were able to cruise through. Because the US team is built up of, like, 12 of the top 20 golfers on the planet right now.
Why does that competition exist then?
Because the rest of the world need something. I mean, it's a bit unfair to have this Europe against the USA, and then there are some great golfers who have come through in the last few years, like Matsuyama from Japan, Tom Kim from South Korea, Biesenhout, the South African. There are some great golfers that are coming from these parts of the world, but this was probably the best President's Cup in a long time, and I still, as a big golf fan, couldn't find myself being drawn into it, because you just knew the eventual outcome would be, well, you know, the USA will win eventually. Like, they should win. They definitely should win. So there's no real drama to it unless the rest of the world win. So it's kind of like watching City in the FA Cup semi-final against Barnsley or something like that. And that's no disrespect to the rest of the world, but it's just like City should win. If Barnsley do something, that's more impressive. Yeah, true. But yeah.
So, but I guess you're saying, sorry, Ollie. Yeah, you're leading towards the question of like what's the most one-sided sporting event in the world, right?
Yeah, 10 years now of the US winning the President's Cup in a row.
Okay. So I guess the flaw in that question is that if something is incredibly one-sided, it's not just because one side isn't very good, it's because the other side is very good, right? And can that ever be boring in sport? As in, like, when Bayern won 9 straight titles, or Juve won that string of titles, or City have dominated in recent years, or in the tennis, like, you had the big four. Like, was that boring? Then Nadal, Djokovic, Federer, Murray, like, the big three really winning so many slams. I mean, I guess, like, whenever you have something that's really one-sided, it's because one side has just taken that extra step, basically, and become closer to perfection, then you can't touch them. So is that boring? Yes, it becomes boring after a period of time. But the most one-sided sporting event, I think football often breeds it. I mean, I gave a couple of football examples then. It breeds it because the structure of football is there and can't really be changed. Whereas I think other sports, maybe it's easier for outsiders to come in. But it's a great question. Have you got any other examples that you can think of, one-sided sporting events that are consistently dominated by one side?
Juventus was one that certainly sprung to mind in terms of their dominance of Serie A. And I think there's also something to be said about this, in that team dominance is less impressive, I think, for some reason, to a large part, than individual dominance. Because no one really got annoyed with, like, Tiger Woods winning golf, just destroying golf, basically, for the majority of his career, and being the greatest golfer on the planet and one of the best we'll have ever seen. No one got bored of that, because you look at the individual and go, that's so impressive what he's doing to level that, keep that level of just going and going, and the consistency is incredible. I think in team sports, especially football, when money's involved, then it becomes boring, because you can buy your way, as we touched on already about Manchester City.
External factors, right?
Yeah, you can buy your way out of any trouble that you get into. It's heavily weighted in your favour because of the financial bias that's going in your favour as well. And therefore, you can just pick up pieces and put it all together. Go on, yep.
Steve Redgrave in rowing. That was domination, right? Just another example that popped into my head. He won those like 4 or 5 Olympic golds in the rowing, like on the spin with Pinson, Redgrave and Pinson. So like a duo, but yeah, just an example of complete domination.
Well, I think the example of this would be, I'm sure people got bored of, for instance, the Chicago Bulls winning 6 in 7 in the NBA, but people didn't get bored of Jordan. So people don't get bored right now. If Scotty Scheffler's have been the best golfer in the world, outstanding. But people will get bored if there's a lack of competition there to test him, and to test then the USA in Ryder Cups and in President's Cups. And it's a really weird fine balance how it's easier to respect the individual than it is to respect the team sport. Because even in golf, like, there aren't that many external factors. I'm sure the top players in the world have a significant advantage in terms of the facilities that are afforded to them with their practice, their training, etc. But that comes with any athlete that finds success on an individual level. But then
Lance Armstrong had a few external factors, yeah.
Well, you're far more streamlined when you've only got one testicle. I think that's a big advantage. Weight loss in all of those. But even so, look at Formula One. People get very bored of Mercedes winning, but everybody lauds Lewis Hamilton for winning those world championships, because they kind of respect the driver as well. So I don't know if you can ever get bored of a bias as an individual or on the individual athlete, but you can get bored of a lack of competition in the team, so to speak.
Yeah, it's really interesting that. Also, like, the individual it's more difficult as an individual, and also there's just more of a shelf life somehow. They won't carry on. It's almost like now when Pep Guardiola's had such dominance, right? And you hear like this line, half joking, can't wait till he retires. Oh, it'll be great when he retires, that kind of thing. And I think, I don't know, there's something in that.
I want to finish by posing you a question, Windsor, and it's all about the South American football to finish off. Is it going to be a River Plate Peñarol Libertadores final? Is there any chance of that happening? Because we've got Peñarol, one of the great Uruguayan sides in this competition, who have not done really anything on the continental stage for a long period of time now. We've got River Plate with Marcelo Gashado returning to River in that newly revamped stadium. It's going to be in Buenos Aires, the final. I mean, it's looking for... That is the storyline, surely. The battle across La Plata. River against Peñarol. That's what every neutral South American football fan... And I think it would attract world football fans more if it's River Peñarol as opposed to another 2 Brazilian sides.
100%. So there's 4 sides left in the Libertadores, South America's Champions League, and 2 of them are Brazilian sides. Brazilian sides obviously dominated in recent years, Ollie. One's Atletico Mineiro. Let's be honest, they don't transcend the continent as a brand name, as a club name. Most people, if they're interested at all, will be interested in the fact that Hulk plays for them and still is pretty prolific, although missed a penalty in the week. The other is Botafogo. Botafogo are actually quite an interesting club, Ollie, because they've been bought, I believe, by the same group that owns Palace, or that they have a lot of money basically, and they've been bought by. They've got a lot of money, and the ambition is to make Botafogo as big as Flamengo and Palmeiras and all the other big clubs in Brazil. The top of the table in the Brazilian league standings. They're the best side out of the 4. They're the best footballing side out of the 4. But what Ollie's correctly saying here is that the romantic final is between 4-time winners River Plate, like one of the biggest football clubs in the world in many different ways. We said this on the pod before. They got the biggest stadium in South American club football. They fill it every week, despite Argentina having a 50% of their country living in poverty. They fill 84,000 every week. Ian Wright said on the Overlap podcast this week that if there's one sporting event he would love to see and has not seen, it is River Plate against Boca Juniors. So River are there as just this incredible footballing name. And you add in the fact that Marcelo Gashado, their iconic hero head coach, has come back to the football club. Lost for the first time this weekend in the league, actually, since his return. But the other club is Peñarol, who are like this Uruguayan giant, 5-time winners of the Libertadores. Only 2 clubs have ever won more, Boca and Independiente. And they're just this, I mean, Uruguay's a tiny country, Ollie. 3 million population. Like, on a clear day, you can see Uruguay from the banks of Buenos Aires. Like, it's this tiny country, and I mean at the end of the world. Like, if you were to set off now, Ollie, to try to get to Uruguay, you'd be there 40 hours later. It's so fucking far away, and it's so small. And Peñarol are based in Montevideo, the capital, which you can take the ferry easily between Montevideo and Buenos Aires. And Peñarol, for the first time in years and years and years, last time in the final was 1987, are 2 legs away from getting in the final. And if it is a River Peñarol final, I do think you'll see podcasts have a little segment about it. I think you'll see column inches. You'll see Jonathan Wilson flying out to Buenos Aires to cover it for The Guardian. I do think you'll see a lot of that stuff because it's River Plate against Peñarol is the romantic final, but it's probably be Atletico Mineiro, Botafogo, and no one will care.
Yeah, I was worried about that, of that being the final sign-off, that it'll be 2 Brazilian sides and no one will care. If Gashado wins the Libertadores, what does that do to his footballing reputation once again? Does it put him back in a crosshair for European jobs after obviously going off to Saudi Arabia and taking that money and his stock plummeting a fair bit?
Has to be.
Yeah.
Has to be. Won it once as a player with River, won it twice as a coach, including the greatest moment in River Plate's history, beating Boca Juniors in the final, that second leg in Madrid. If he comes back with quite a poor squad, really, if he comes back and wins it again in his home ground, in his home city, it's just an absurd achievement. He'll be right back in amongst the mix for European clubs. Whether he wants to go or not, I don't know. He loves the football club, and where else, people value different things in life and in football, Ollie. And where else can he walk out to 84,000 spectators every single week singing your name? Like, where else are you going to get that? You might get that for a couple of weeks somewhere else, and then you have a couple of bad results and you just get vilified. Like, where else? Like, everyone's got a fragile ego, and like Gashado knows whatever happens, he walks into the Monumental, which is his fucking stadium. Like, it's his football club. Like, he's been, they've won it 4 times. He's been involved in 3 of them, once as a player and twice as a coach. Like, imagine when he goes to bed tonight, he must think, there must be a part of him that thinks, this is my fucking football club, isn't it? And it is. So where else can he get that? Nowhere. So yeah, I mean, but I don't think they're going to do it. I don't think they will, because I think Atletico Mineiro is stronger than them, and I think Botafogo are better than Peñarol. I hope it happens, but I don't think it will.
Even if he gets them in the final as well, it's the ultimate big daddy move. Like, talk about big dick energy. But yeah, Martin Di Michelis comes in to take over from the Gashado era. This kind of, all right, we've got the new hot Argentinian young manager. He's going to lead us on after what Gashado did. And Gashado's like, thanks for just being the placeholder. Daddy's back. I'll take the reins here. Thank you very much.
There's also a school of thought. I think it was Napoleon that said, don't give me good leaders, give me lucky leaders. And there's kind of a school of thought, which is a little bit bitter, but other football fans in South America think Gashado's a lucky coach. And when you think he's come back, Di Michelis already took River through the groups, right? In the last 16, and the Libertadores last 16, you're generally going to get a big boy from Brazil. They got Talleres of Cordoba, who are in awful form, right? Beat them. Then the quarterfinals, they get Colo Colo. Now, Colo Colo, they're a big club in Chile, but it's Chile. It's not a big boy from Brazil. And now in the semi-finals, they've got Atletico Mineiro, who are a good side, Atletico Mineiro, but they're not Palmeiras, they're not Flamengo. Do you know what I mean? They're kind of mid-table in Brazil. They've got a great chance to get to the final. And then they'd be in a final against either Peñarol, who haven't won it for, fucking 30 years, or Botafogo, who've never won it. So there's a feeling that Gashado's just, he's a little bit of a lucky man as well.
Right place, right time. It's never lucky, mate. If you're consistently doing that, it's never lucky.
Hey.